Welcome to the first ever episode of Leaders of the Game, the podcast where I sit down with senior execs from the sport and entertainment industries. In each episode, I'll be talking to exceptional leaders, exploring their unique paths, the decisions that define their careers, and the lessons they've learned along the way. In today's episode, I'm joined by James Sutherland, Head of Partnerships at Williams Racing. For more than 25 years, James has developed a career within strategic partnership management in elite sport, predominantly within global motorsport, and has been at the forefront of creating and delivering sophisticated partnership activations. With over 2 decades of experience working within high-performing teams in which people and culture sit as the cornerstone of success, this promises to be a great listen. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss out on new releases and all the exciting content that will follow. Welcome to Leaders of the Game, James. Great to have you on board.
Yeah, James, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
No worries at all. Well, I guess let's start by giving the listeners the overview of you. Give me the introduction. Tell us about your journey to becoming Head of Partnerships at Williams Racing.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, as you say, Head of Partnerships at Williams Racing. It's a job I've had since early 22. But my route to get here has been over about 25 years or so. Started my career straight out of university working for Peugeot Motor Company up in Coventry, where I went straight onto the graduate scheme there. That's kind of where I guess to a certain degree, I not fell in love with motorsport as such, but got a small amount of involvement with a British touring car program that Peugeot was involved with. And I was quite fascinated by why brands would sponsor motorsport teams. So I started sniffing around Formula One. I was extremely fortunate, right time, right place, to land a role at McLaren in early 2000. And I pretty much stayed at McLaren for a good part of 17, 18 years. And I left in 2018 and joined Branson's Virgin Formula E team, which was still kind of start-up at that point. It was end of season 4 of Formula E back then. I spent a couple of years there before deciding to do my own consulting business. And actually that then led me into Williams, where I joined full-time in January 22 as the partnership. So yeah, 25 years pretty much at the top end of motorsport.
So you didn't love motorsport 25 years ago, but I guess over the last 25 years, your love for motorsport has grown.
Absolutely. I think certainly within the world of Formula One, anybody who works in the sport has to love it. You give up, you sacrifice so much of your personal life and your family life to do the job. You wouldn't be able to do it unless you loved it. But 25 years ago, I kind of didn't even really follow Formula One. It was only really when I kind of had that taster of touring cars back in basically the mid-90s that kind of got me into it. And yeah, something I've absolutely kind of learned to love and want to do anything else now.
And it's a sport that's evolved massively, which we'll come on to in this podcast. But I guess diving straight in, what's been the most rewarding moment in your career so far, and how's that shaped your approach to commercial partnerships?
Yeah, actually the most rewarding, I have to say, probably was Lewis Hamilton winning the World Championship in 2008 when he won the Drivers' Championship. I mean, that was rewarding in as much as sport, as we all know, is a hugely emotional piece of entertainment. So much hard work goes into these things, whether you're an engineer or a mechanic, or you work in marketing, commercial partnerships, whatever it may be, that it was that just huge release of emotion when Lewis crossed the line and won the World Championship back then. And that was absolutely a highlight. I can't say there's probably a direct link as to how that's shaped the world of partnerships, but what I would say is that, to my earlier point about sport being kind of a real emotional driver, I just love the world of partnerships and connecting people and finding kind of really authentic stories to tell with partnerships. And I think motorsport does a great job of that. So yeah. I wouldn't say that the two parts of the answer are necessarily linked, but there's certainly an influence from championship success to what I do now.
Amazing. Got a lot of guests on this podcast from different sports: Formula One, football, cricket, tennis, rugby, golf. And I think we all love sport, right? But we always watch sport to see the outcome of the actual event, whether it's your team getting 3 points on a Saturday, whether it be a racer finishing first or getting on the podium. But the business side of things, the partnership side of things, a lot of my friends always ask me in the pubs, what do these people actually do? So can you tell us, what does a typical day-to-day look like for you as this head of partnerships?
Yeah, well, great question. And I have to say, you're not going to like this, but there probably isn't a typical day, to be perfectly honest with you. But to give you a flavour of what we do, certainly at the partnerships team at Williams, we're responsible for setting the strategic direction of the partnerships, building the relationships with a multitude of stakeholders across the partners business, and essentially looking at ways to deliver value and drive commercial success into those partnerships. And that can be anything from activating at Grand Prix, but also a huge part of it is the work that the activations that we try and deliver away from the Grand Prix. And by becoming what I always refer to as business integrated, we're moving away from just activating our partners at 20 or so Grand Prix in a year into building out strategy roadmaps and activation plans that essentially are valid 365 days of the year, not just across 20 weekends in a given territory. So it's pretty diverse. As a partnerships team, we sit to a certain degree at the core, a little bit like a bicycle hub, if you like, with spokes going out to all of our different subject matter experts in comms and content and creative and events and merchandise and licensing, whatever it may be. So it keeps us busy.
Can imagine.
But ultimately what we're here to do, what I ask my team to really think about day in, day out is putting themselves in our partners' shoes and what keeps our partners up at night and what can we do further to just keep delivering value back to the partner.
Yeah. Partnerships in Formula One especially is very dynamic, right? So how do you balance the creativity side and the strategic side for the needs of your partners?
Yeah, good questions. The strategy side is actually the bit that I have to say personally I love. And we work with a strategy team within our commercial arm at Williams. So we're kind of commercial partnerships together. So the strategy piece is something we would work together with the partner on, and we'd understand, well, actually the start point is us agreeing mutually what the partnership narrative is, right? What the mission for the partnership is, what the narrative for the partnership is. And that helps us collectively mutually define what the objectives are. And then from the objective setting, it's much, much easier then to brainstorm activation ideas because everything is underpinned by the Halo narrative and clearly what the objectives are. So that bit of it is something I love getting my teeth into. On the creative side, we've got an excellent brand team, creative team, and we kind of work a little bit like an agency to a certain degree. I wouldn't say we're quite yet where we want to be in that regard, but we're growing in sophistication and being able to offer more and more additional service to our partners, and whether that's certainly through content ideation, filming content, so the production arm of it, editing, and then of course the distribution, which we rely heavily on our comms team for. We're moving more in that direction of being a sort of full service rights holder, which I can see more and more happening across the industry. But I think F1 is a good leader in that regard. There's some other teams that do it really well as well, and I think we're developing quite strongly in that agreement.
Williams have such a storied legacy in Formula One. Do you leverage on that when dealing with partners, new partners, existing partners?
Yeah, I mean, the history is clearly a significant part of who we are, right? We carry the name of Sir Frank Williams, our founder back in 1977. We've got a variety of world champion drivers under our belt. We've got 16 world championships in total. And together with Ferrari and McLaren, we make up essentially the three teams that have been battling it out every 2 weeks in Formula One. It's essentially 1977. We're the only three real legacy teams. So the history is incredibly important to us. And it's interesting actually when you certainly look into the data at new fans, believe it or not, history and heritage is a really important part of the fandom, and something we've seen more and more from things like Drive to Survive, that history makes who we are, right? And we do leverage it quite a bit, and we've in the kind of physical world, what that means for us is the most phenomenal museum at Grove in Oxfordshire, where we've got such an amazing number of like awesome championship winning cars or innovative cars that led in the field of technology on show for people to come and see and enjoy. And it's really great. We do leverage it quite a bit.
You mentioned Drive to Survive, and it was one of my questions that I really wanted to tap into, because since that, I'll admit, before Drive to Survive, I wasn't a massive F1 fan, but to see it as a documentary on Netflix, the ins and outs of race weekends and everything else that goes around Formula One, I just got engrossed by it. And now I'm like a massive fan. How have you seen that impact? And I'm going to relate this back to the partnership side and the sponsorship side, because surely that elevation of the sport worldwide has opened up partners that I presume you thought would never have come to the world of Formula One. I mean, you've been in it such a long time. You've seen the evolving partners that come into the game.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, when Drive to Survive started, I recall was actually around the time of COVID. I've actually lost track of the season that it started. At that point in time, you go back and watch season one, there aren't that many teams who embrace the concept of the sort of intrusive behind the scenes Netflix cameras in every meeting or kind of, every conversation, and skip forward 5, 6 seasons. And of course, everybody is now opening the door to Netflix, and they're kind of omnipresent there. They are literally at every Grand Prix. You don't really notice them anymore. And what it's done for the sport is, I mean, we use this cliche to say game changing, but it is absolutely game changing in the world of F1. Almost every single person we interact with, whether that's trackside or in meetings or even down the pub, wherever it might be, inevitably will reference at some point in a conversation Drive to Survive.
Like in this podcast as well.
Like in this podcast. So it's had a massive, massive impact. And for what it's done for the fan base is phenomenal as well, in terms of lowering the average age of the fan and shifting the gender balance to be more equitable. And it's opened a huge number of doors globally. And I'm sure every team will kind of echo that. Drive to Survive has been a good sort of catalyst for conversation and being able to get in front of brands that perhaps otherwise would not have even seen Formula One on their radar. And particularly in the US as well. Drive to Survive, clearly a Netflix series, but the US is a market that it's really, really helped us with. As Williams, we have a number of US brands that I have to say probably wouldn't have been with us if it wasn't for Netflix. Brands like Duracell, like Kraken, and others, Stevens, which is a big investment bank. It's Drive to Survive, really, which I think was the trigger for that interest. And like every team, you're trying to capitalize on those opportunities.
And do you talk to partners about the visibility now that they would get from just partnering with a team in Formula One that's going to be on Drive to Survive?
It's certainly mentioned, but the teams don't have any editorial control over what appears in the series. It's not as if we can have conversations saying,
you will get this.
You will get certain coverage or whatever it might be. But we call it the multiplier effect, right? If you're a brand on a piece of inventory, then inevitably there'll be some degree of coverage. But the stories of Netflix are beyond our control. What happens in a season that Netflix want to cover is outside the team's control. So that will influence how much coverage an individual team or driver or team boss gets. We've got no say over that. So it's a little bit potluck, but it's certainly mentioned in conversations, but I wouldn't say that we would use it as a metric of any sort to validate a partnership.
Be like a Brucey bonus if they got a nice
Absolutely.
clip of their brand on Drive to Survive.
Yeah.
What would you say? Obviously, you've been at McLaren and you're now at Williams. What do you think makes Williams stand out as a partner compared to not necessarily McLaren, but other teams on the grid?
I think the first thing is we're an underdog, right? And we're an underdog undergoing huge transformation. And when you delve into that transformation of what we're trying to do, there is a great story to tell. And brands want to be part of that storytelling. They want to be part of the transformation and the re-energization, the reinvigoration of Williams to bring it back to the front. And I think that's frankly what does differentiate us from the others. We've got a very unique story to tell at this point in time, and it really does resonate with the brands that we talk to, and the partners that we've got also lean into that storytelling as well, because the authenticity of the storytelling demonstrates that you've got brands actually credibly helping Williams to transform its people, its culture, values, behaviors, technology, innovation, whatever it may be. We've got partners who are playing active roles in all of that.
Could you share with me then what's been your favorite or the one that you're most particularly proud of from an activation or a deal that's taken place in your career? It doesn't have to be now. Go back as far as you want.
I will focus on the most recent because frankly, I think 2024 has been phenomenal for Williams and its partnerships. I've actually lost count of the number of awards that our partners have and ourselves have won with their activations. And things like a Gulf Bolder Than Bold livery that we ran at the back end of 2023. There was a full integrated campaign around that special Gulf livery on the car. And we started the year with 2 awards, Sport Awards and the Race Media Awards with that particular campaign. And then about February time, we pulled together with Michelob Ultra, an amazing of CGI AI fueled story that was with Logan Sargent racing ex-Williams champions around Silverstone, and it was kind of AI generated. I mean, a huge amount of work went into it. That's gone on to win Cannes Lions Awards, Clio Awards, all sorts of other accolades. And then most recently, one of our other big partners, Komatsu, has been shortlisted at the European Sponsorship Association Awards that will take place in the new year. So I have to say, not just those three partners I referenced, but so many of our partners are doing really kind of groundbreaking, class-leading activations. And I have to say, 24 has really been a highlight in that regard. I don't think I've ever come through a year with just so much activation that's being recognised on frankly an international stage, not just within the world of motorsport and F1, but across the world of sport business. So it's been a great year for us in that regard.
What do you think's driven that? Because, I look at it and go, right, well, Drive to Survive has obviously really elevated this game. And I keep going back to it, but it's really elevated the sport. But what are you putting this down to? The demand for all these partners wanting to sponsor and partner with you?
Well, I think the first thing is that we are actually quite selective with the partners that we're bringing into Williams. And to the outside world, it might not necessarily look like that, right? People see empty spaces on the car. They assume we can't, get the sponsorship that we're going after. But there's an absolutely defined strategy behind what we're doing. And it starts with, keeping good company and having the brands on board who, first of all, really want to be part of our journey. They really want to be part of the storytelling. Once you have that bedrock of authenticity and create this really compelling narrative, the activation actually flows fairly easily. I mean, it's not quite as simple as that, but you can create these kind of really compelling stories in the marketplace, and consumers are loving it. And that's what we found with nearly all of our partners, reaching into their respective audiences, whether it is on the consumer side, B2B side, tech side, whatever it may be. And with our support, as I mentioned earlier, right, the way that Williams is acting like an agency, a full service agency, we're really able to collaboratively pull together these activations. And we've moved away from the transactional mindset of a partner phoning us up and asking us, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we have access to a driver? Into being far more proactive, strategic, collaborative. And it's really paying off, quite frankly.
And who's setting that strategy? Where does that strategy come from?
So the fundamental strategy for each partnership sits with me and my team, and we're the one to work with our partners on agreeing what that looks like, what that journey looks like. And it may not even be over just a 12-month period. We're looking at how we develop partnerships over 2, 3, however many years of the term. So it's not just an annualized process, but that's really the heart of the partnerships team, is setting that strategic direction for each partner.
And what would you look for? I'm probably putting you on the spot here a little bit, but if there were 3 things that you look for from a brand to really fit with the strategy that you guys are following, because like you said, some people might look at the car and be like, oh, there's some space there. Why did they not fill that? Could they not get the money they wanted? But like you've just said, no, it's not that at all. It's because we couldn't find a suitable brand that fits within what we're looking to achieve. What do you look for from a brand? Top 3 things or something?
So, perhaps not necessarily top 3, but just kind of, I guess, more just brands that really understand the position that we're in. We're not looking for, or we don't really feel that we've got space for impatient brands who want immediate success in terms of podiums and race wins and championships, because that's just not where we are at this particular point in our transformation. That will come, and there is a strategy that James Vowles and his team are working to bring Williams to the front. But as a commercial and marketing team, we can't lean into that success factor at the moment. So we want brands who understand where we are on our journey, as I mentioned before, have a authentic and credible story to tell, and who can also work for us. And I'm often saying to my team, it's not always about what we can do for our partners, it's what our partners can do for us. That's where you get the kind of true sense of the word partnership as opposed to sponsorship. I mean, if I look at some of the Duracell campaigns that ran earlier this year, both the US and across EMEA and LATAM, we were in, certainly if I take TV commercials, for example, we were in 15 markets across Europe and Latin America with the Duracell bunny and a great ad that they pulled together, 15 markets that we wouldn't otherwise necessarily have gotten into, but then followed up by huge amounts of point of sale in mass market distributors, right? So whether you're talking Costco, Walmart, Home Depot, whatever it might be, and their equivalents across Europe and Latin America. You can't walk really into a store and not see the Williams Duracell point of sale. It is everywhere. And that is also what we're looking for in partners who can really leverage our brand and help not just drive our revenue through sponsorship fees, but help build out our brand and drive our fan base. They're kind of the three things that we're looking for.
Yeah, it's funny because whenever I'm in the pub with mates and they say to me, "God, it must be so," when I actually talk about the business side and these types of roles within sports organisations, they go, "God, but it must be so easy to sell sponsorship on the side of an F1 car or the front of shirt at Man United or stadium naming rights." I'm like, it's really not. There are challenges. I guess let's give the listeners some of the challenges. What are some of the challenges that you face when negotiating deals with partners?
Well, performance is always one of the first questions that people ask, right? Is why Williams, for example, this year, 9th in the championship, why have you gone from 7th to 9th? So performance is always a key. And then, of course, any sophisticated brand wants to get into the weeds of numbers. They want to understand what the fan base is of not just F1, but Williams, how engaged our fans are, and so on and so forth, right? We get properly into the weeds of metrics. So it's not as simple as waiting for the phone to ring. There's a lot of armchair experts out there who I'm sure think it is just that simple, where you're just sort of waiting for someone to phone you up and ask if they can sponsor you because you're now, if Carlos Sainz is a driver.
Yeah.
Far from it. We've got a phenomenal commercial team led by James Bauer, also ex-McLaren actually, and they are working tirelessly with outreach and talking to brands and selling them the Williams vision, and to be part of this team and its ambitions to be back at the front. It really is. It's probably one of the most challenging things. I don't sit directly in the sales role within a sort of more of a client management role, and I don't envy my sales colleagues because it is tough out there, but they are doing a good job, really great job.
So moving into a new year soon. What trends do you see shaping the future of partnerships in F1?
I think you're certainly going to see more and more brands wanting to tell authentic stories. I think you're seeing this shift into brands where there's either technological integration or there's some other form of support that they're giving the team. I don't mean like value in kind support, but I mean just support of expertise, thought leadership, or whatever it might be. It could be technology itself, but I think the authenticity in those partnerships is something that you're seeing more and more. So I think that will continue. I think certainly at Williams, the trend that we will have will continue, that we won't be cluttering our car with brands. We've taken a decision on having a maximum of X. I'm not going to tell you what that number is, but X number of partners on the car, and that will be managed. We'll continue what we're doing at the moment in managing our inventory and making sure that we've got a good collection of brands that all complement one another. So I think it's kind of the same trajectory, quite frankly, that we've seen over the last couple of years. And then I think even from a commercial partnership point of view, we're looking ahead to 26 with rule changes and what that opportunity might bring.
And from the strategy side of things, do you categorize your sponsors into different industries? So you wouldn't take two from one industry or two from another? Yeah,
you do. You would carve out particular category rights for each brand so that you could have brands in the same sector. So, for example, give you a fairly straightforward example. We've got Stevens as an investment bank partner, and we've got Santander, which we recently signed just after the Abu Dhabi GP, across retail banking. So yeah, there's two financial institutions that sit side by side, and literally sit side by side, as they'll have their names next to one another in our sponsor stack next year.
And when a new driver comes in, like you mentioned, Carlos coming over, is there a strategy around partnerships now that he's on part of the team? Does it change a bit with a new driver coming in, or not really? It's business as usual?
It's business as usual, but what Carlos brings with him is a phenomenal fan base, right? And then a real appeal. He has his own brand that he's built up through, certainly most recently through Ferrari, and that is attractive to partners. It's not to say that he's bringing sponsorship directly with him, but he is just more of an appeal to brands that we're talking to. And the combination of Carlos and Alex probably is one of the most dynamic in the sport next year is something that's giving us a head start as well.
Yeah. You mentioned obviously you don't envy your sales guys, but I'm sure there's so much collaboration across the partnerships team. Talk me through, I guess, the different verticals that you've got, how you collaborate, whether it's, a pitch to an activation to everything else that goes around it.
Yeah, so if you think about the life cycle of a partner, it'll start with the sales team, with that outreach. Myself and my partnerships team will be drawn into those conversations at a relatively early stage, because my team are at the front line of all of the conversations that are going on with current partners, understanding the market trends, what's happening, is the ground on budgets, et cetera, et cetera. So, we get brought into the sales team. And as the pitch evolves, we'll have varying levels of integration into the conversations. And then with the onboarding, we kind of lead the onboarding process, that once we convert into a partnership, we draw upon I guess we refer to them as subject matter experts, but you've got a phenomenal comms and PR team, social team, content, our experiences team, merchandise and licensing. All of these kind of business verticals come together, not just for the onboarding, but then my team act as a little bit like project managers. Right? You sort of can imagine the plates spinning on sticks with all of the different projects and initiatives going on, that they're reaching out to all of the other departments to ensure that at any given point in time we've got the right people across the business talking to the right people within the partner's business. So it's a kind of matrix approach to how we manage things, but we're finding quite a degree of success with that.
And outside of success on the grid or the track, what do partners look for?
I think with us, honesty, kind of rawness, sort of unfiltered approach to what's going on. We're not shying away from what's happening to Williams on and off the track. 2024 is one of the most expensive in terms of crash damage for the team, but we didn't shy away from the fact that our drivers were putting the car in the wall. In fact, we kind of tried to optimize that opportunity. And for example, we put out some amazing content after the Brazilian Grand Prix, a race at which both drivers sustained significant crash damage. And we told the story of what was going on behind the scenes with the car coming back from Brazil, frankly, in bits, being kind of tipped out of a cardboard box onto the shop floor and rebuilt in time for the Vegas Grand Prix. And I don't think there are many other teams that would be prepared to give that level of unfettered access, real behind the scenes access. Clearly, a lot of people across the business had to sign it off, but everyone was supportive that that's what we should be doing. We should be delivering this kind of real honest message to our fan base and our partners about the journey that we're going through to get us back to the front. And it'll be over a number of years. But I think we owe it to our really loyal fan base to share that story with them as openly as we can. And that's really the point of differentiation that we're seeing across the grid.
And how do partners deal with that? Are there any difficult conversations that you need to have when content like that goes out?
No, not really. I think, honestly, it goes back to the earlier point, right? Our partners are with us on this journey, and we're very open, and we share what our comm strategy is. And, we've told partners that we want to be open and honest, and they embrace that. And on that particular piece of content, there was absolutely no pushback whatsoever. And in fact, partners were supportive because they were liking, resharing, and engaging in the content themselves and putting it out through their distribution network. So, we were very fortunate in that regard.
How early on in your career did you realize this is the route that you wanted to take? Was there any advice or anyone within your professional career as you were starting out that really guided you down this route, or was it organic?
It was organic to the point, obviously, at which I got into Formula One in early 2000s. But the great thing about our sport is that whichever team you're in, you are surrounded by some phenomenally talented individuals. And, I joined McLaren at a great time, early 2000. It was just after Mika had won the World Championship. The team was on a roll, almost unlimited budget back in the day. But I was surrounded by some amazing people. And, at that point in my career, I worked for the marketing arm of McLaren. It was its own business called McLaren Marketing, and that was headed by a gentleman called Ekram Sami, who grew up under Ron Dennis's wing. Ekram was phenomenal in what he did. He and Ron created things like the Paddock Club, which now everybody takes for granted in Formula One, but it started off as a McLaren initiative. They almost set at that point some of the big benchmarks of activations and partnerships that we look back on now and we think, well, actually you can't even remember at the point at which it started. But things like a two-seater F1 car that the McLaren developed in '98, it's those sorts of like things. We take cars up into space and drivers up into space. Also during the 90s, there's loads of stuff that was going on. It was led by the vision of Ekram, and I always felt he was a great mentor and a great guide at just how to deal with the world of partnerships and how to really, really create value. And without kind of going too much down a rabbit hole of controversy, I'll never forget the year of 2007, which was the Spygate scandal with McLaren, which could have been devastating to the company in terms of losing partners. And I think only one partner left the team at that particular point in time. And I do remember saying to Ekram, how did you manage to hold on to all of these partners at this fairly low point in McLaren's history? And Ekram just said to me, it's the strength and the depth of the relationships that we've got with all of the key partners that has meant that all but one of them has decided to stick with the team. And that kind of rings true in my ears to this day, is all about relationships, right? Whatever we've been talking about, strategy and creativity and all of these things, which of course provide huge value to partners, but it's the relationships that are absolutely critical. And that's where we do spend a lot of our time, ensuring that we're really building out the right relationships with the right people.
And that's with your partners. How do you foster that internally? I guess let's put it onto a leadership perspective. So your role, obviously a very big role within Williams. What approach do you take to leadership internally?
Well, I think that the leadership at Williams has come not only from within the world of F1, it's come from other industries, not even sport, but just kind of a collection of individuals who have been very successful in previous lives. And I think the pillar that binds all of us together is the value that we put on people and culture. And people and culture sits absolutely at the heart of what we're trying to do at Williams. The marketing commercial arm of Williams is now fronted by Peter Kenyon, who many people will know as the former chief exec of Man U and of Chelsea. And he also turned around and built Umbro into a global apparel brand as well. And Peter leads the commercial and marketing arm with a view that whatever we're trying to do, you cannot do without having the right people in the right place. And with that comes ensuring that we've got effective communication and collaboration, and that everybody feels they have a voice, and just trying to stitch together what in our arm of the business is now about 90 people in marketing commercial, really, really just trying to make people feel valued and identify the ways that which they're contributing to the success of the teams. People and culture absolutely are the key to it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you talk about that collaborative approach as well. I think, like you said earlier, with the different verticals of the sales and then the account management and project management, the licensing side, if you're not collaborating, it's just a recipe for disaster.
It is. And actually that in itself has led to a somewhat controversial move in that we've stopped work from home, which many people will roll their eyes at, I'm sure. But we felt at where we are at the moment in our transformation, in trying to build a high-performing team, we've got new people joining us every week from not just F1, as I say, from different worlds, that if you need to create a high-performing team and create the right mindset and culture, you can't do it sitting in a kitchen. And we took this view, controversial as it may be, to ask everybody to work 5 days a week back in an office. We've invested, through our shareholders have invested in office space in central London. So we now have the choice of either going out to Grove in Oxford or we can work in the London office. And that as well has been a significant part of making sure we not only attract but retain the right talent, giving them the choice of location, but making sure that people are collaborating, are face-to-face, can grab that kind of ad hoc conversation over a coffee and not having to schedule Teams or Zoom calls the whole time. And I think it is making a difference. And I think on reflection is probably something we should have done a bit sooner.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's certainly what we're going to be doing for the foreseeable future.
I think it's a really sensible move, actually, because you'll get so much value from that coffee machine chat. You never know where it's going to end up. So I really like that idea. Talk about your favourite part of race weekends, both from a professional perspective and a personal perspective. What's your favourite part?
From a personal perspective, absolutely just love the start of a Grand Prix. I must have done almost 300 Grand Prix in my career. And as the cars take to the formation lap and they take that kind of slowish lap to the grid and the lights come on one by one. And when they go out, to this day, I get goosebumps. I love it. Whether we're front, middle or back of the grid, I absolutely love it. It is my singular most favourite part of any race weekend. I have to say it's probably the end of the Grand Prix. Yeah? And what I mean by that is regardless of where Williams finishes in an individual Grand Prix, any given Grand Prix, the smiles on people's faces, right? The pleasure that they've had being hosted at a Grand Prix is amazing. And we get some awesome feedback from our guests, regardless of what's happened on the track. And that's so rewarding. And that's not just to the partnerships team. That's to our events and experiences team. It's to, again, everybody who has interface with guests over a weekend. So to go away from any race with guests on a smile on their face, and perhaps partners whose own clients are saying this has been the best weekend they've had, is really, it's just, job done. We've achieved success regardless of what's happened on the track. So, yeah, professionally, I'd say the end of the race, actually.
You mentioned something earlier, which was really interesting, around obviously the team's growing and you're bringing people in from F1, but you're also bringing people outside of F1. I see a lot of it, and I'm really keen to see people's journeys throughout whatever vertical they work in, whether it be commercial, marketing, finance, legal, technology, whatever it may be. I've always found that Formula One is the industry where people just move from teams to teams, and the hierarchy within Formula One teams just like to recruit from other teams. But you mentioned something there where you said Williams are taking people in that don't have Formula One experience. Talk me through that a little bit. What's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, well, certainly from my own team, I've got people who have got phenomenal F1 experience and have worked in other teams or perhaps an agency working in and around the world of F1. But I've also got people who haven't got that. And I think certainly from my perspective, when it comes to how do we deliver value to our partners, it isn't about the knowledge of F1. It's about how do we create compelling, meaningful activations that resonate with a partner. And for that, you need a much broader background in marketing, let's say, or certainly account management than necessarily coming from another team. I'd much rather sit in front of a partner with a group of partner managers with that diverse background than necessarily saying, well, I've got X number of people in my team who've come just from within the bubble of F1. So it's actually quite a deliberate approach that I take to the recruitment in the POPs team, is not necessarily to bring people in from F1. Now, what I would say is it doesn't exclude people from F1, but those people would, in my mind, would have to, if they're working with another team to come to Williams, still have that kind of varied background. I'm also conscious of not trying to create a mirror image of other teams. I'm really trying to look for Williams being a point of differentiation and being far more attuned commercially and from a marketing point of view into what makes brands tick than necessarily what might come with just showing people around the garage or kind of the old school type of account management, which does still exist in the sport, and I'm trying to move away from that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're taking that approach of anything you can do to be better than your competitors, which I think is what it's all about within the world of sport. I guess the question I like to ask people that operate within the world of partnerships, one brand or one organization, regardless of budget, like you can have them tomorrow, who would it be?
Yeah, it is a great question. And I'm probably not going to give you the straight answer that you're looking for, because I'm not necessarily sure that the company that we'd want to work with or the brand we'd want to work with is to say we want to work with brand X. Again, it's more about the belief in what we're doing and having that shared vision and overlapping values that make partnerships so full. And frankly, you can do so much more when you've got brands that are aligned to you. So I'm going to chicken out and not give you an actual
You're not
brand.
giving me a brand.
Not giving you a brand. But other than to say that it's a serious response that the best partnerships are the ones that just work, where there's a natural fit. And that could be a brand that no one's even ever heard of. But if it's a right fit and it's authentic and gives you great storytelling, and you can engage your fan base with those stories, then it will work. And they're the best partnerships that I'm sure anybody would want to work with.
Yeah, and your values are aligned, and it's just a recipe for
Completely.
success. What's your favourite race location?
Yeah, great question. I'd have to say Melbourne, and that's not
Interesting.
just for the air miles, which, by the way, they are good air miles going down to Melbourne.
Yeah.
It's Melbourne is a city that loves sport, right? Whether it's F1, whether it's tennis, whether it was rugby, whatever it may be, right? The Aussies absolutely love their sport, and you can go down to Melbourne, and the city just lives and breathes F1, bars and restaurants. Just they're celebrating F1 coming into town, and it's a little bit like a carnival. And I have to say, it's not too dissimilar to places like Montreal, where the city just lives and breathes the sport. But Melbourne, it's down on the beach. We're down there kind of March time, so it's still warm enough to at least
Get your
acknowledge
trunks on.
that you're. Well, I'm not sure. It's a long time since I wore trunks. But you can feel like you're going away. And in 2025, Melbourne is the first Grand Prix of the season, so I think there's a lot of people in the sport really looking forward to getting down, perhaps a couple of days early. But it is the fans love it. Businesses get involved. Yeah, great place to host a race. I really love it.
Amazing. So obviously this podcast, I've called it Leaders of the Game, and obviously you are a leader in your game. We've spoken about how you get the best out of your team, collaboration, the environment, but also giving people that just want to know what the head of partnerships at Williams days look like, right? Even though they're not all the same. I want to sort of finish on this one, but one piece of advice that you would give to somebody starting their career in partnerships, whether they want to go down the F1 route or any form of sporting organisation, what's the advice you would give to somebody starting out?
The advice I give is ask questions, listen, learn, absorb, and just ask questions. Because in F1, whether you work in an agency, you work in a team, you are surrounded by some of the most talented people. And there are so many people prepared to share their experiences, share what works, what doesn't work, give that kind of guidance and if you like, mentorship to people. But I do see a lot of individuals coming in at the beginning of their career who do think they know it all. And I would say just stop, listen, learn, ask questions. And if you follow that advice, you'll have a great career in F1.
James, it's been a privilege and really great to have you on the podcast. Good luck for the rest of the season, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Lovely. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Cheers, James.